You're listening to a Faith Matters podcast. Well, welcome back to Faith Matters. You are listening to Denise. This week, I was thinking about where's the change. The blog is called Where's the Change? Where is the change when we are being hurt by a person? Do we just put on a brave face? Do we just act polite whilst underneath that let rage stir and become bitter and dread seeing this person? Or do we allow our heart to soften toward them? And, you know, we are taught when we're children, I think, especially when something's gone wrong, a friend and us and a friend or us and a sibling, and there's been a disagreement, so often parents or adults will come in and say sorry. And sometimes a child can manage that, but there are times where they're still so furious or they're still so upset and they can't bring themselves to. Or I think maybe it's sometimes those children who have a really strong sense of justice and they're just like, but this was wrong. They robbed me of my doll or whatever it might be. And they really wrestle with coming around to the place of saying, I'm sorry that I whacked you for taking my doll. We can, as adults, we can try and sort of force a child to what we think of as doing the right thing, regardless of whether they have had a heart change towards the situation or not. And so a lot of us grew up knowing what it was to behave properly, knowing what it was to be polite, and being able to put this front on that in this environment you behave this way, in that environment you behave a different way. And so we learnt how to act for the different places that we went. But I think, when that carries on into everyday life, it actually, as an adult, I think can be a bit dangerous. You can have people who are pretty superficial and they'll do things because of the response that they want to get. They know how to manipulate the system. They know how to figure out in this environment, if I behave this way, I will have this type of outcome. And when we act in that way, we're not necessarily acting in agreement. Our heart and our head aren't necessarily in agreement. We might be, sometimes somebody will say, hey, let's go out. And you're just like, ugh, I'd really rather not. Yet we go out. And so we've got the choice to, in our heart of hearts, to begrudge that for the whole evening. Or sometimes it's actually, we have a heart shift and we're just like, actually, this is awesome. Thank you so much for encouraging me to come out. But when you go about life with your heart is in one place, but your actions are in another, there's this emptiness there that can only be filled when we bring ourselves back into alignment. Where you're trying to get someone to behave according to social expectations, you might get compliance. Thinking back to the children, you might get compliance, but you don't get heart change. And then I just sort of repeated that sentence in a slightly different way, where you're trying to get someone to perform. So rather than just behave, what about if someone is just performing according to social structures? You might get observance, but you don't get connection. And actually at the heart of relationship is connection. And so when we're going through life trying to meet other people's expectations, do the things that other people expect us to do, and our heart's not there, actually we can end up really lonely. And I think there is perhaps a little bit of an epidemic of loneliness in our world today. And I wonder whether it's because we're doing what is expected of us, but we're not doing it with heart. That could very easily sound idealistic, but I mean, you see movies where somebody has been doing this job and they're just going through the motions, and then they step out and they do something which is what they're really passionate about. And it makes a good story because we know that there is deep fulfillment in doing what is going on deep within us. So I think we all want to behave in a way that is in agreement with our heart attitudes, but we've just sort of had it stamped out of us. We'll probably talk a little bit more about this next week, because I can only imagine what Marie would have to add, thinking about acting out of our heart as opposed to acting out of our head, not just behaving, but actually living out of connection. When we have sort of had hurt in a relationship, actually we were just talking about this before, about that codependence idea, is do we actually value the person who hurt us enough to realise that they have a story too? If we're talking about it in a marriage setting, do we value the person that we are married to or in a relationship with enough to realise that they have needs too? Sometimes those disagreements can happen because we're looking at it from one perspective and we haven't seen that actually this person actually needs a bit of a break today, or whatever it might be. So once we understand what's going on for them, we can balance that a little bit more with our own emotions and rewrite the story. So when you hear someone's name and they are somebody who's hurt you, how does your heart respond when you hear that name? Do you absolutely have sparks going flying everywhere? You leap into hostility overdrive and your emotions just go crazy because this person has really hurt you, even though you behave the right way when you're in their presence. And I think that could be really telling as to when you are just behaving appropriately in front of them versus when you've actually allowed your heart to heal. So I'm not saying that we allow everyone to walk all over us and we just let everyone go. Certainly if people have been hurtful, you can certainly take steps to put things in place to keep yourself safe. So I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about actually what are you holding in your heart against that person. I guess you could argue that if you are upset with a person and you shun them and you cut them out of your life, you're actually being congruent with what's in your heart. But perhaps that's still your heart is hurting and broken, and maybe there's some healing that could take place there. You know, some tension is good. If we don't have any tension in relationships, nothing ever happens. But this is when we are hurt, when we carry resentment. What are we going to do about that? What I have learned about resentment is that it leads on to bitterness, to anger, to rage, to violence. And so when you're in a family atmosphere where there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of this kind of thing, actually, it's not just going to solve itself. The only way to get out of that cycle is to forgive, to let things go, to release. And the only way that you can do that is to confront the reality of what's really going on in your heart. Doing all the right things and behaving appropriately on the outside is never going to be enough to break that cycle. Even now, are you just trying to contain the anger or the pain? What is actually going on in your heart? Is there a longing that's been neglected? Is there a hurt there that has led to you believing a lie? What is the lie? Is it that somebody used to say to you, you're useless, and you've started to believe that? Like what Jax was saying earlier about she'd been shut down in her household as she grew up, and so now as an adult, she didn't see that she had any value. She didn't see that she had anything to offer. And it was only when she came into relationship with God that, you know, God is the one who created each one of us, and he sees the value that he's placed in us, whether we see it ourselves or not. And so how powerful for her that she had that shift or that turnaround when she began a relationship or a connection with God himself. He actually changed who she was. The lie that she believed got replaced with a truth, and that truth was, you carry value, you are made for a purpose. Her truth that she was talking about today was, you know, your marriage will be restored. There is something more for you. There is more to your story. This is not the end, it's not over. And so we can believe all sorts of things. And when we invite God into the situation and we allow him to speak truth to us, he can rewrite lies and years of what we've been believing, because he loves us and he knows us better than we know ourselves, and he knows our potential and what he has placed in us even when we can't see it ourselves yet. If this sort of thing hits a nerve, I encourage you to sit with these questions. What longing in your heart has been neglected? What is going on in your heart? What lie have you started to believe? What hurtful thing did people say so often that you used to kind of think, no, that can't be true, surely there's more, and yet now you've just come into agreement with it? Where have you substituted heart change for behaviour modification? You've just gone along with the flow, started behaving in the way that people expected of you, and yet you know there's more. We present ourselves to the world in a way that we think is socially acceptable, and we want to be liked and we want to be loved. We present to the world what we think they want to hear, what we think they want to see. And yet, truth be told, all of us are a little bit broken. All of us have got stuff going on that not everybody is aware of. All of us have got parts of us sometimes that have been hurt and they need healing. And we're a little bit, we carry that hurt, we carry that brokenness until finally we can actually come to the point of going, you know what, I release that thing. I choose not to carry it with me every day, and I'm going to release that person. I talked about in the blog about when we carry resentment, it's like a poison that starts to seep into other things. And I know we've certainly talked about unforgiveness being a poison, and how you can, when you're holding on to something against someone else, you want to hold on to it so that they are punished, but the only person that's really being punished is yourself. And to come to terms with that and to get to the point where we can actually let those things go for our own healing, for our own benefit, is really powerful. And so there is an aspect of forgiveness that we really wrestle with that just seems completely counterintuitive. And yet when we can let our hurts go and set things up in a healthier way, I think again, that story that we had today with Jackson Umberto about how she thought that he was her everything. And once she was able to put that down, then she reapproached the relationship differently, more healthily, with a give and take as opposed to just taking. And I think that's a really good example of what it is like to grow and change in our relationships. So do we really expect a hurt that we've carried for a period of time to resolve in a moment? Well, probably not. So give yourself time to process. Do we want to build connections with those around us, or do we just want to settle for good behaviour? Do we just want to have an acting career that is our life and people don't really know the real us? They only get to see the us that we present to them. So I want to just encourage you, at what level might you want to see change? Do you want that change to last? Do you want it to just be a pretense, an acting, a putting something on, putting on a mask? Or do you actually long for a few safe people to see who you really are? People who can walk with you, people who can journey with you, people who are real. And can we actually share a little bit of our heart with those people? It's vulnerable, it's scary. The thing with people is you don't know how they're going to respond. And yet the payback when we are able to do that is powerful. And we were saying earlier that people are always going to let us down. It might be that actually you are surrounded by people who are not trustworthy, people who have, when you've tried to be real with them and they have trampled on what you've shared, they have hurt you time and time again. And it is always the case that there are no one person can ever meet all of your needs. And I think that's, again, where it circles back round to our relationship with God, our relationship with our Creator, that when we build relationship with Him, as Jax was saying earlier, he was challenging her. He was saying, I've got this plan A for you. You can choose plan B. God doesn't actually force us into relationship. He doesn't force us to do stuff, but He presents stuff to us and we can make choices. Sometimes we are strong enough to make the hard choice, which is what Jax walked through. Sometimes we don't, and He chooses to be faithful in that and stay with us even as we go through this road that perhaps was not the best for us, but He's there. And the cool thing about God is that God does, He gives us His aspects of His character. He gives us His love. He gives us His compassion. He gives us His peace. He's our safe place. And although other people might not understand how this relationship with God is actually sustaining us, He's right alongside us and He doesn't disappear. Sometimes we're the ones who step away and we're just like, it's too much, it's too hard at the moment. And He is faithful and acknowledges that and waits for us. He continually invites us back into relationship. And when He is pointing out those hard things, there's this really cool verse in Romans, there is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. He doesn't point with a snarl. He doesn't revel in pointing out our weaknesses. When He does point those things out, it's always done in love. And when I have felt that prompting myself in my own life, it always comes with kind of an inner strength to think, I could work on that. And knowing that He'll be right alongside us as we do that. I hope that you have been encouraged today. We say we're fine. We've all got stuff going on. And so wherever you find yourself today, just ask for God's peace to be in your situation, that you will find a strength in the midst of life that you didn't know even existed. So we're going to come to a close now. We'll see you next week. You've been listening to a Faith Matters podcast. If you have questions, email us on faithmatters98.1fm@gmail.com.